Clyf Hıgh Webbot report for May to June. Now, I'm going to just quickly skim over the opening section because this is my first post that Cliff's allowed me to do from the UK. He's only allowed me half an hour, so I'm just going to quickly skim over the introduction as to exactly what the Webbot report is, and you can just pause it and have a quick read through just to get yourself up to speed with what this report exactly is all about. And that's it. Into this. Europop. The designation of Europop may be ending with this report. Much of the new data sets in this area are showing a violent attack by Muslim extremists, followed by open street battles between core peoples and Muslims. That is described as breaking up the last vestiges of the EU mindset. First, the crashing Italian banking system will put even more pressure on the EU's central control. Then the deaths at the hands of Muslim extremists will be brought into sharp focus as a cultural hero emerges in the background. The immediacy data shows a young man, Northern European, who will rescue a hostage potential death situation with some extraordinary skill, and then go on to rise in public acclaim, to be the point that his presence becomes in mere weeks too much for the central authorities to tolerate. They then pressure him in such a way to reveal their motives to the public, just as yet another Muslim attack occurs. At this point, the young hero is shown as transforming into a leader who will then gain even more fame in the fierce street warfare. Further, the detail sets are showing that the real problem for the EU central control is going to be the refusal on the part of the police to engage with the young hero and his followers. The data suggests that this lack of action will be the trigger for some upcoming street warfare that will erupt in Europe over summer 2016. Other areas of Muslim versus European population datasets are suggesting that the Jewish communities of Rome and Spain and some Austrian cities will be accused of small arms smuggling after a gun battle between Muslim extremists and Jewish home defense group. While the data shows the successful repelling of extremists, the resultant political backlash, mostly over the innocent victims of the Jewish rifle shooting, is shown as doing more damage to the cultural adhesion of the Jewish communities in Europe than the extremist attack would have achieved. Much of the Europop entity new growth is either directly to or tangentially part of the breakup of the European Union. Many new sets are showing that the slogan is going to lead to a breaking of the associations of the member states. The impetus for the breakup seems to originate in Portugal and Spain rather than failing Italian banks, nor the remnants of Greece. The previously forecast sets for the return migration wave is still growing, and with the recent processing has new sets that shorter term values. This may be hinting that we are within a few months of the expulsion war. Gaelic pop, which is an island. Strange is the Gaelic language, and by its grammar and structure dissimilar to most other languages, except in it shares some common base elements with really ancient languages such as Pali and Sanskrit. What is of interest at the moment is the data in showing that Ireland, and specifically far old Gaelic Ireland, is about to discover itself to be even older, more ancient, as there will be some very, very deep in the ground anthropologic discovery that will place Gaelic as a language in what the data describes as its appropriate time. Further, the data describes this time as being more than half of its present cycle, or about 14,000 years old, or about 5,000 years older than anyone may think at present. But that is not the strange part. being forecast by the datasets, very extensive cross-links to the Space Goat Farts entity shows that the Gaelic language to be discovered in a deep, dry place will be both readable and sensible. It would seem the datasets are describing the finding of a treasure of words that will be in Gaelic and be over 12,000 years old. The data is showing a huge level of excitement developing in Gaelic pop, no matter where it's located on Earth, and that excitement is going to both continue and grow as the discovered Gaelic language is translated. From this point in the data, we are looking at lots of unknown references which automatically place us in the crosslinks over to the Space Goat's Farts entity. In some of the set, there are hints we may be getting a version of Gaelic Vimana, ancient flying machines of Vedic texts, or Gaelic anti-gravity flying machines. The real issue involved with the anthropologic discovery would seem to be the authorities in both Ireland and the Vatican. In both subsets, the data shows that consternation and confusion and blame become primary emotional states as the authorities will be finding themselves becoming aware of the new discovery only as the public knows. The datasets are forecasting that some months after the discovery, governmental shake-up will occur simultaneously with the economic dysfunction and the political scandal of this young century. This is shown as making things very interesting politically as the population gets a taste of the weakness of the authorities. We can think blood in the water as a call to the sharks in Gaelic pop. Other interests that will be threatened by the language discovery, including, of all places, India. This will be due to the links between ancient Gaelic and ancient Tamil civilization that will surface globally during the Gaelic rediscovery of ancient roots. In this process, the Indian government is shown as being embraced by its attempt at central eradication of former Tamil participation in pan-global seafaring civilization. In other areas, the language is showing that Ireland is going to have heaving stomach as it tries to digest yet another economic punch, this time from a currency's perspective. As this next round of economic troubles comes to Ireland, the immigration escape will once again be open. These sets are describing a brief diaspora in which the Irish entrepreneurs head south to South America, these leaving a failing economy behind at home. Sets are also common to both Germany and France, as their educated entrepreneur class becomes frustrated with deteriorating conditions and decides to go to where opportunity beckons. It will be no accident when residents of the EU start to see commercial messages that feature the good life in South America. In spite of economic troubles and many Southern Hemisphere states, the data is showing that the young population of Ireland will be deciding to emigrate as there is more perceived freedom in Southern economies. Further, the data sets are showing that some of the advertising will be wasted as conditions will be going downhill so fast as to insert currency fluctuations and failing corporations into the many of other problems with leaving a failing economy. In other words, after a brief flourish, the emigration memo dies, along with the US dollar as world reserve currency. It is then that the young Irish blood is shown as turning inward on the weakened old political system. Other interesting news sets are linking the Australian housing bubble and its international corruption to corporate Ireland. This link is going to involve some large sums of currencies and will, according to the data sets, be opened up to public view as a side effect of unintended consequence by a murder investigation in yet a third country. And as an edit note, late processing shows Canada may be site of the investigation into foul deeds. Long-term data shows the island pop becoming at home in sub-ocean enterprise with a special focus on deep western waters and something that will be called the slope by those involved. Moving on to markets. The datasets are filling with repetitious language for bonds failure. The language is not collapse, but rather very specifically focused on failure. The language includes spikes, repeated by moving up, peaks, binding, yields up, deflationary failure, and pumping higher. Other languages goes to limits denied and orders pending, deliberately and delay an official tactic. Many other sets accrue in support of trader sweat and boiling guts and pounding hearts, but these are not in the primary supporting chain and are linguistic of shots, adding to the flavour of the upcoming Bond disconnect. Other sets are showing that the global Bond harmony is going to be disappearing at a rate so fast as to be palpable to the trading communities. This appears in the model space at the very edge of July. The first few data elements that are within this set are splatting into our awareness in early July, about the 7th or so. Thereafter, the data accrues at a pace that brings us to a large bulge of the supporting sets growing to the threshold of more general awareness by mid-July. Stated another way for clarity, the data growth patterns would seem to be suggesting that the more general global population will become aware of the extreme dysfunction of the bond markets by mid-July. The forecast is for the subject to become more frequently discussed over August and through the disasters of fall 2016. From the point of view of the data, what is forecast to happen is a bond, probably a corporation, which is backed by, but apparently not directly issued by, a government, is to go into default in such a manner as to cause a conflict. The datasets are showing that the conflict, later in June, is what creates the conditions for the wider bond and defaulting period. After the period of late June through August, there are some suggestions in the data that the bond which triggers the rest is related to an insurance company which is in distress due to a large number of natural disaster claims that it must settle. The datasets continue new IM and ST value growth for locked out and unable to claim profits. And the IM is immediate term and ST is short term. You can see that in the glossary higher up at the beginning. And other language go into a huge, massive MF global situation developing as a result of the bond seizure, in which liquidity freezes up nearly instantly, such that corporations are unable to convert debentures into any form of money, cash. This shutout is also described as being locked out or ripped off and stolen from and denied access to legal profits, and many other sets in the same range of meaning. Further sets go to the idea that corporations involved in the denied transactions will be under orders from their banking partners to commit illegal acts and to falsify records, as well as destroy records and evidence. So I wonder if that's similar to what JSNP's talking about, where they're going to possibly blow up the COMEX in Chicago. That's one way to eliminate evidence for the paper gold rigging and the paper silver rigging. Other sets go to the same context of profits taken away by fraud, which is by acts of deceit and document destruction. There are any number of branching sets in this group which, when taken, bring up other linguistic structures that are going to similar situations in slight variance of the same locked out of my account language. And the datasets show that the victims howl across the globe, and the officialdom let them howl while they're doing nothing. The datasets are forecasting that millions will lose their winnings as they will be denied access. So if you've got your money in your paper stocks, things like that, and you're winning, you're making money on your stocks, you're making money on your mining shares, you will be possibly denied access to those shares, which is why you hear a lot of people saying, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And that's exactly why. In spite of the very large emotional tone sums and the amount of dollars involved, this caught out, unable to collect situation is but a small part of the large unfolding of the loss of the financial system. The data accretion patterns have the caught out, unable to access profits episode hitting the media mere days before the great unravelling starts, peeling away the various layers, retirement plans, pensions, annuities, etc. of the global social safety net. The datasets are virtually screaming that gold and silver and Bitcoin will over the next 10 years be reaching towards prices that are being described as many tens of times our current prices, As this situation develops, the whole of the planet and human technology will undergo a total transformation. These sets for the huge increase in paper currency price of gold and silver, part of the sets for silver too precious to use industrially, which is being forecast as a result of the monetization of silver. Much of the market's entity new growth language is bringing in supporting positions for consolidation. Other supporting sets also include coagulation and motion slowdown in an economic way. These supporting sets are primary support for contraction of the economic activity. The notable exception to this language is showing up in the gold, silver, Bitcoin sets. The coagulation set growth includes specific focuses on Chinese markets failing. Much of the language is dominated by crash and double daily drop that is forecast to be beyond 65% in drop in values. This Great China Crash language is heavily cross-linked over the dollar wall and the collapse of trade shipments to with much of the Western financial world. These sets have grown in subsets, including constipation of the shipping channels, by which it is meant these channels of raw materials through the finished products. This data is showing that constipation in China's production channels is going to persist for a number of years. Also, the Western financial system comes unbound and reverts to real value. Datasets have detailed language about the new in-box phrases showing up in the later half of next decade, post 2025, in which items created before the Great China Crash that were never delivered to the shores of USA during the breakdown of the JIT delivery system and then were shunted off to rest quietly for many years will be resold back to China as curiosities in about 10 to 14 years' time to great profit and much excitement. And we all thought that we had seen bad earning reports in the past. No, not according to the data. The datasets are forecasting a massive and chaos triggering reaction by USA-based corporations as the dollar craters and earnings follow. Yes, it would seem that perhaps corporation earnings should rise in a period of a falling dollar, but the data would have that not be the case. A further slap in the face to the corporation pimps globally will be the almost instant follow of the announcements that Chinese earnings are crashing to the extent that their corporation structures are being threatened by massive mass bankruptcies. These new sets for spreading corporation malice and fading corporation earnings globally are also supporting the massive layoffs, firings that will be ripping around the corporation world. In many of these sets, we see that the lucky people are described as those accustomed to self-reliance and self-directed, self-motivated. The new detail sets for the corporation employment devastation include many sets for wandering crowds of former salary workers with nothing to do, and vain attempts by officialdom to control and direct the tens of millions of now idle workers. It is in part that the consolidation in the corporate world of the coagulation of the oil markets that is shown as destroying wealth and eviscerating, gutting, flaying, skinning the savers and those who are near retirement. The oil market's coagulation, drop in demand over supply glut is a prime mover in the multiple times increase in the perceived value of precious metals. Other factors within the new data sets that are forecast to have an impact on the precious metals markets include the earthquake still being forecast for China. Location may be incorrect, in which the side or after effects will include the shutting down of many of the world's mines. Some of these will cease operations due to insurance issues, others due to safety concerns, others due to collapsed tunnels, and others yet including pit miners are described as being flooded out by shafting aquifers. Note that these closures are not limited to China. Other economic impacts of the earthquake are described as disabling ports and breaking dams, though apparently not destroying them, more likely creating threatening cracks and failure to make electricity. The earthquake is also shown as having widespread economic impacts within the financial system as the China slowdown turmoil problem gets worse. The idea coming up from the data is that a distracted and damaged China will be a giant economic break on much of the global financial system. This is indicated to be the case for about 6 months or so. Then the rebuilding effort gets underway as a big push to get the miners brings the last of the impacts on the global markets to close. However, the data shows that the Chinese appetite for precious metals becomes even more ravenous as their own internal production is reduced by some unknown but significant amount. Model space progressed slowly through summer Northern Hemisphere 2016 has the market's entity growth gaining as the volume leader over all of these entities except in Terra. The market growth patterns have new sets for congestion and crowds and groups that are all described as trying to force themselves into or out of one of the major areas of problems. The idea coming across is that the markets are going to begin to reflect the panic of the herd. This panic is shown as being accelerated by the crowd effect. Much of the detail reads like a script for a Three Stooges movie with a large, great crowd who are all trying to get through the same door. These sets are going directly to failing hedge funds and retirement programs dying that are trying to move vast quantities of paper debt currencies out of their dying paper debt assets. Other sets are describing a global surge to get out of paper currencies. The market entity has some interesting and humorous details such as the national smugness of India pop as they bask in their gold holdings. Other more positive areas include China until the earthquake cuts mining production and Australia. The datasets in global pop and markets entities show that the Russians and the Chinese are very unsettled and wary as the USA central officialdom starts to show cracks in the edifice as it comes under internal pressures. Continued accretion in the subsets of panic and dollar among other currencies has large supporting sets of shorter term and immediacy data providing that the congestion of crowds trying to either get their money out of failing systems or get their money into precious metals will force the government to control access to governmental offices. The idea is that very large crowds are at all the government offices in any way connected with handing out money, social security, welfare, and inevitability. These situations will get out of control from viewpoint of the government. Note that this is not country specific, but does only refer to those countries whose paper currencies are directly supported by the USA Federal Reserve Bank. As model space has moved, inching forward through summer, seeking the points of flex within the ground of global political financial system, there are hints coming out in early June in new language about Bitcoin. This new language is centered around the use of actual Bitcoin, not the blockchain. This new language is forecast to be mainly appearing in China and to have the near immediate effect of causing a stampede to purchase Bitcoin. These new sets forecast in many new Chinese languages. Descriptors about Bitcoin are also to be found in China Pop entity. The directly held value sets are focusing in on Chinese use of Bitcoin, not merely as a capital wealth storehouse, but also as an investment, speculation, gambling vehicle. The idea is coming across that some form of popular women's entertainment show will be the spark which ignites a new level of adoption by the Chinese population. The datasets are forecasting that by September, about 1% of Chinese young population under 40 will be favouring Bitcoin and dramatically involved, likely to obtain with Bitcoin in this year. The sheer numbers involved are described as being self-reinforcing and feeding frenzy and jumping up the frenzy of Chinese purchases and becoming self-promoting. This last group includes language about how the exchange owners in China will be promoted in media as a result of the new interest in Bitcoin by the larger population. The dataset points to these kind of business promotion articles which will all have a positive spin as producing a problem for the Chinese officialdom. The issue will come down to riots, rumours, unrest versus allowing gambling and speculation on Bitcoin, which is not controlled by Chinese central authorities, as a major promoted distraction. We can all guess which one of the power structure will take, and thus the data is suggesting that Bitcoin starts to cross the chasm in China for young adults with money. This is indicated to be participating in the boost of the dollar price of Bitcoin past the $650 mark. It is at this point in summer, after the June solstice and sometime before mid-August, as it appears in model space, that Bitcoin begins to pop up several times each day, that the data sets are also accumulating the new sets for massive global upheaval in the bonds and yield levels. As model space is moved through this period, the data shows that attempts at currency creation are undertaken by the governments in many different forms. The data sets further are showing that the population in general are reacting badly to the erosion of the dollar and thus other local currencies' purchasing power.